Be seated, state your name, and spell first and last.
My name is Lawrence James. Lawrence, Lawrence, James, James.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you, Governor. Good morning, Agent James.
Good morning.
You also go by Lauren, Loren.
I do.
Where do you work, James?
I'm employed with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation.
What do you do at the Bureau of Investigation?
I am a Special Agent Forensic Scientist Supervisor in the Memphis Laboratory. I supervise forensic scientists as well as forensic technicians in the evidence receiving unit.
Agent James, how long have you worked with the TBI?
I've been employed with TBI since January of 1999, so a little over 18 and a half years.
Both as a special agent and as a forensic scientist.
That's right.
When did you become a supervisor, forensic scientist?
June 2013.
Agent James, I want to ask you about your education and how you came to be a forensic.
Let me probably just a minute. Stipulate,
Yes.
all right, stipulate that he's an expert in the field of forensic science. You can go into whatever you want to, but I'm going to give them the opportunity to board here if they weren't going to stipulate.
I'll shorten this up.
Okay.
Thank you. Agent James, tell the jury, please, where you went to college.
I went to Union University,
And you graduated with what degree?
a Bachelor of Science degree in biology,
What year?
1997.
With honors?
Yes.
And have you worked in the area of science and law enforcement pretty much since that time?
Yeah, there were a couple of years when I was flirting with grad school, but started working at TBI when I was 25.
One of the areas that you're involved in is forensic biology and DNA.
That's right.
Tell the jury how you have experience in those areas.
Yeah, my background is in forensic biology or DNA testing. I trained for approximately a year and a half under the supervision of other qualified DNA analysts at TBI. During that time, I had hands-on experience with approximately 300 cases. I also spent a lot of time in the scientific literature. I had to prepare presentations for my peers to establish my grasp of the material. And at the end of my training, I had to complete a simulated case and defend my work in a simulated court environment. Also, during my training, I completed the TBI's Forensic Scientist School. This was basically, it was a 6 weeks course that gave me an overview of all of the disciplines provided by TBI, specifically within the context of applying those at crime scene processing. And so when I completed that course, I was qualified by TBI to participate in the violent crime response teams for West Tennessee. So I have a slight working knowledge in some of those areas, such as microanalysis or latent print analysis. My specialization is DNA. I still do some DNA testing on a good day if I get lucky and have enough time to do some of that. I'm also required to attend a certain amount of continuing education every year. Generally, that takes the form of attending forensic conferences, or sometimes we'll bring training in-house within TBI and train our analysts within the discipline. Besides that, I've completed training. I've completed the FBI's DNA auditor program, which qualifies me to audit DNA laboratories. So that's kind of an overview of it.
Thank you, James. How many number of serological and DNA examinations have you conducted over your time as a special agent forensic scientist for TBI?
I stopped counting a long time ago. It's at least thousands, if not tens of thousands of tests.
You ever been qualified as an expert in courts of Tennessee in forensic serology and DNA analysis?
Yes, sir, I have.
How many times?
I believe I'm at about 95 times right now.
No, there's been a stipulation as to qualifications, but I would tend to him as an expert last time.
He's 96.
Thank God.
Sure.
Agent James, you talked about the violent crime response team. Tell us more about that.
So TBI we offer the service of violent crime response team for West Tennessee. Generally, that entails responding to violent crimes over 90% of those, I would guess, are either homicides or officer-involved shootings. Essentially, what we do is we go into the scene that has been made secure by the local agencies. We document in various forms, such as video, photography, things of that nature, sketches, and we'll also collect evidence, search the scene for any evidence that we can find, package it, bring it back to the laboratory for testing, things like that. And then after the scene is over, the team leader generates a narrative of what we did and provides that to the investigators.
Agent James, I want to take it back to April 13, 2011. Were you one of the leaders of the violent crime response team on that day?
I was.
And were you dispatched to the Bobo home at 681 Swan Johnson Road in Decatur County, Tennessee?
I was.
Please tell the jury what you did that day.
The laboratory supervisor at the time called me that morning. He told me that to get in contact with Britt Booth, one of our TBI agents. I called Brent. He told me that there had been a young lady who had been abducted and that they had already done some searching of the scene, but they wanted specialized forensic assistance. And so I got 3 of my coworkers and we drove to Decatur County.
What did you do when you arrived at 681 Swan Johnson?
I was briefed by Terry Dykes. He gave me an overview of what he knew, of what they believed had happened. And he told me that my team's job was specifically to focus on the garage area. That was where Holly Bobo's car was, and there was believed to be some probably important evidence in that area. He told me that her brother had observed Holly being led towards the woods behind her house with a man in camouflage. And Harry told me that they had already searched that area for footprints. And of course, my team, we still went back there and looked for anything. We were looking for blood. We were looking for shoe prints, anything like that. But we were primarily we were concerned with the area of the garage, and later did some work inside the house as well.
Were pictures taken of the surroundings, so to speak?
Yes, photography and video were both collected.
I probably wouldn't.
Yes.
I want him to look at it. Agent James, I'm going to pass you what's been previously marked as exhibits 3 through 13 and ask you to identify them.
These are photographs of the Bobo property.
Put these on the overhead wall. Agent James, I'll tell you, the jury's already seen these and I'm through them if I could.
No, they likes.
Once I got the projector for
I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about it here.
What is that?
That's a photograph of the Bobo home taken from approximately the road leading up their driveway.
Next exhibit, please. What's that?
It's a photograph of the front door, the entrance to the Bobo home.
These are as they look on April 13, 2011.
Yes.
Next, please. What's that, Agent James?
This is a photograph taken from behind the house on roughly the north end.
What's that, Agent James?
This is a photograph taken from a bird's eye view, looking down at the garage floor. You can see 2 steps up at the top of the frame that are steps leading between the back door of the residence and the garage. And basically, you can also see the Mustang over in the lower left-hand corner. It's our car. So these were presumed blood drops, later confirmed to be blood.
I want to pass you forward 12 pictures and ask you to identify them as well. I'm sorry. The next one, please. Before you look at that, James, what is this? It's exhibit 20.
This is another photograph taken from the south looking north. The steps leading up to the back door are at the far end of the frame. Obviously, Holly Bobo's vehicles in the frame. And it basically shows, at least it gives an idea of the proximity of various where blood evidence was located at the scene.
Okay.
You can see, you have a laser pointer. So basically, these approximately right here is where the blood drops are, end on the south end of that carport area. And there was blood droplets going. There was a fairly large pool right here, and there was some up on the step as well. And so this photograph just kind of gives an area, a representation of the area where the blood was contained.
And start after we'll turn to those. This picture. You recognize those, Agent James?
I do.
What are those, General?
These are photographs that were taken in the carport area.
We'll say that those be admitted in the evidence as separately numbered exhibits as we have done. Permission to publish, Ron?
Is that correct through 51?
Yes.
Okay. I publish, Ron. Now looking at exhibit 40, tell us what we see here.
This is a photograph of Holly Bobo's vehicle as it was when I arrived on the scene.
Again, you took pictures of a number of areas of the house and the outside and what you believe to be Crocs.
That's right.
Next, please. Let's turn that. This is exhibit 41. Agent James, what do you see here?
This is a photograph again of Holly's car parked in the carport, and basically just giving kind of a proximity of how close it was to the walls.
Are you interested in anything about the surface of the carport?
Well, yeah, definitely. The carport had a good bit of dirt that had blown in, and so it was potentially a good surface for shoe prints, and that was definitely something that we wanted to be mindful of. And also, too, just the fact that it's close to the walls. You know, when you're working crime scenes, you work with what you've got. You make intuitive decisions. There was also definitely an aspect that as close to that vehicle was to the walls, someone may have brushed up against the vehicle or brushed up against the walls. Maybe left a handprint or, put their hand on the car. And I mean, obviously the fact that blood is there indicates there was probably some sort of struggle. And so all of that kind of factors into our decision-making is when we're looking for potential evidence.
Excellent. See here.
This is a photograph of Holly's car taken from the far side of the carport or garage area.
Next. This one, sir.
That's a photograph taken from the front driver's side corner of the bumper. It was relevant because there was a good amount of dust on the car. I mean, the car had some dirt on it, and which was good for us because we could see where contact had been made to it. And so there was an area on that corner where the dust had been brushed off, where something had obviously made contact with it. And so hopefully, it could have been anything. It could have been the side of someone's leg. It could have been a hand as well that knocked that dust off. And that I ended up taking a swabbing of it in the hopes that someone had put their hand down on it or something like that.
Next, please. James, this is exhibit 44. What did you see here?
This is a photograph that was taken of a partial shoe print that we located in the garage. It's got a ruler in it because the idea is that before we try to lift shoe prints, we try to photograph, with high quality, high resolution camera for the purposes of comparing if we have any shoes that become submitted later so that we can make a comparison whether to eliminate or include as a possible source of that shoe print.
The fact that there is a ruler there trying to get a more specific or precise measurement.
That's right. Yeah, the rulers in there is placed in the photograph so that there can be a 1-to-1 comparison if you actually get a shoe submitted at a later point. Said way earlier, we have a specific unit in our Nashville laboratory that specializes in microanalysis and items such as shoe tracks or tire tracks.
Is this picture taken with the camera on the tripod?
Yes, it is.
Next footage. What we see here, exhibit 45.
This is some sort of print that I thought might have been a shoe. We saw this pattern. It's kind of like a crosshatch pattern, and I saw that pattern a couple of places on the garage floor.
Your shame.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Yeah, so I believed that this was a shoe track that I observed on the garage floor, and this was, I believe we saw this in a couple of locations, and so it's just an attempt to photograph it, hopefully obtain something of for comparison purposes.
Any observations, conclusions here about the condition of the floor?
Well, just that the floor of the garage was quite dirty, for better or worse.
This is exhibit 40, can't say 46. 46. Please tell the jury what you see here.
Again, this is a photograph of a possible shoe track.
Look like pebbles, rocks, or stones on the floor.
Yeah, you can see dirt. I mean, obviously that track appears to be in dust.
Expert. This is exhibit 47. So jury, what you saw here.
Again, this is a photograph, and I'll be honest with you, just looking at the photograph, I'm not sure if there was any part of a shoe print there. It definitely looks like something went through that dirt or dust that disturbed what was there. But ultimately, just looking at the photograph, I couldn't tell you right now if I think that's a shoe track or not. I think it's ultimately just documentation that somebody was moving through there was movement in and out of the garage.
Again, what conclusions do you have about the condition of the floor?
And there were areas where there was a lot of dirt.
Explain. This may be a little bit similar to what you saw earlier in one of the other exhibits. This is exhibit 48 with us. What is that? What are we seeing?
So again, this is a slightly zoomed in photograph of what I showed you earlier. You can't see the stairs very well anymore, but it's basically a photograph that contains most of the blood that's observed around the vehicle.
That's the front.
Yes, this is the front fender.
Where the steps?
For the bumper. I mean,
Where the steps?
The steps are that concrete is the bottom, and I guess that's the first step right there.
James, this is exhibit 49, and there's some Post-it notes on there. Are those yours?
I did add those Post-it notes.
They weren't in the original picture.
No.
What was in the original picture?
So this is a photograph taken slightly from above. This is the step right here. First step. Holly Bobo's car is right here. It's the bumper. And this is the wall of the house. And so basically I was trying to give an overhead shot again of the blood evidence that I observed at the scene.
This is looking down on the other side of the car, still in front, kind of on top of the step.
Yes. It's a little bit awkward. It's definitely not parallel with the ground, but I was doing the best I could standing on the stair.
And those groupings have some importance with respect to your scientific testing later.
That's right.
I'll come back to those. Let's see that. This is exhibit 50. Again, those are Post-it notes you put on there.
That's right.
Tell the jury what this to you.
So this is the stair going up to the back porch. The wall would be on this side of the photograph. The vehicle would be on the left side of the photograph. This is a zoomed in area. There was a pool of brown stain that was close, within a couple of inches or so of the stair, a few inches of the stair. And there are also some other blood stains in this view. this one became, it caught my eye, and I can explain that later.
Well, let's go to the next. One.
Okay.
That one caught your eye,
It did.
looking at exhibit 51 here.
That's right.
What is that? That's again, you're supposed to notice.
Yeah, it ended up being reported out on our report as Exhibit 1E. Basically, it's a blood stain that was it appeared different from a lot of the other stains. Many of the blood stains appeared to be drops that were on the floor of the garage. This one looked like a smear. There were also, I don't know how well you can see it. This photograph is pretty, focus isn't the best, but there was one spot down here, and then this kind of an extended. It's almost like that. The stain together looked like an exclamation point. But the thing that stood out to me was that there were like striations or lines that were observed. They looked as if some sort of pattern had been impressed on that stain. I don't know. I called it rich detail because I've got that terminology in my head from latent print examination, but ultimately it looks to me like striations from fabric, like denim, or I don't know. I think my khaki pants that I wear to work most days tend to have striations in them that are real subtle, but they look like that.
Big words. That's kind of like a pattern.
Yeah. Just parallel lines.
We'll come back to the blood just a moment. I'm going to ask you two more. I'm going to ask you a question about two more photos. My standing approval to approach.
Yes.
I'll show you two more pictures and ask,
Yes.
what are those?
These were photographs that were taken of Holly Bobo's car.
Do you recall if these were taken the next day?
They were taken the next day.
No, the state would ask these be admitted into evidence as the next two exhibits.
It's 2 and 3.
I published those, Your Honor. You met it. This is exhibit 52, Agent James. That's that same Mustang
It is.
in the garage, carport the next day.
It is.
It was in the same spot.
Yes.
Yeah. What are you doing here? What were you trying to do?
So I've been called back to the scene around involving a possible what appeared to be a latent print on the hood. And so this is a photograph of the front passenger side fender near, the area of where the hood kind of curves down onto the side of the vehicle. And yeah, I think the next photograph will explain it.
Excellent.
It'll be kind of self-explanatory. So there were.
Is this the hood?
This is the hood. You can see the wheel well down here. And this line right here is the hood. And there was a smear area right here. But you can see it's not small. It's large. And likewise here, you can see where the dust kind of, on this side, the dust was totally wiped off. On this side, it was just disturbed a little bit. And there's a smear in there, and it very much looked to be like a palm size smear. There was even ridge detail that was observable in it.
You have to say it easy way. You responded to the scene that day, and the next day took pictures, took samples, did crime scene investigation. And you also acted as a scientist after, correct?
That's right.
Go back up. Exhibit 49. Exhibit 49 has these post-it notes that may not be entirely clear, but when the jury gets it in the jury room, they'll see. Tell them what will they see.
Okay. So obviously blood evidence can be a valuable tool in terms of, examining crime scenes and examining evidence. There was a good amount of blood here at this scene. My approach generally, speaking for myself and most of the people that I work with, we don't process every blood drop we see. We don't swab them individually. I might have had 50 or 60 blood drops here. My approach, number one, I'll just give you my mindset. The importance or the significance of blood evidence is to establish who was at a crime scene, who was bleeding at a crime scene. Obviously, if you've got a victim of a violent crime, a reasonable assumption is your victim is very possibly going to be bleeding at the scene. That's the case in the vast majority of the crime scenes I respond to. At the same time, my goal is to seek to put someone else, a possible perpetrator, at a scene using DNA evidence. And so my approach here was to group these blood droplets, the blood stains, into manageable group sizes that would allow me to cover most of what is represented here, to test most of it, and at the same time, not spend the next 6 months analyzing blood drops on the garage floor. So what I did was group these into 5 different areas and collect a representative sampling of blood droplets from those areas. I told you earlier about the shape that looked like an exclamation point, that looked like something had been pressed into it and left the striations or the pattern in it. I sampled that one separately just because I thought it was interesting. You know, my feeling was either somebody knelt down onto a blood drop and smeared it a little bit, or it was already on somebody's clothing and they knelt down and transferred it onto the ground. Either way, it was a different stain than most of the drops that I observed.
Which one is?
So you can't see it very well in this photograph, but it's roughly in this area, right? I can't see it. It's right here. That's it. That's 1E. Yeah. I called it swab number 5 in my original notes. And when it got submitted to the laboratory, it became exhibit E. And I believe my report says area with ridge detail. It's a swab from the floor of the garage. It says area of ridge detail. There was another area. The first stain that I collected was roughly this area right here that encompassed this large pool right here. I mean, that was a fist size, approximately, blood stain. So not just a couple of drops.
That's 1A.
That's 1A, and I called it a large stain on my report just to clarify. There was another grouping. The second swabbing that I took was a grouping of what appeared to be blood drops that were over close to the wall. And again, thinking maybe if 2 people are scuffling in this area, maybe if both of them are bleeding or whatever, maybe one person's blood might be over here versus right here. And so I took a sample right here that became exhibit 1B in my report. It's just swabs from floor of garage near wall. The third grouping was this far. This is the grouping that's the furthest south. It roughly lines up with about the middle of the hood. I mean, that license plate on the front of her vehicle is a pretty good estimate of where those fell in the scheme of that area. And so I called that swabbing ended up being exhibit 1C, swab from floor of garage, south end of the pattern. And then the fourth stain, there was a grouping that was kind of in this middle area, and you can't see it very well. I was kind of disappointed how the photographs came out, but there was a stain up here on the step as well, a good sized stain. And so I swabbed that area along with those. So that was my fourth grouping, and I called that swab from floor of garage, stairs.
So let me see if I can summarize. This area is the area that had the plaque number 1 on it.
Right.
You took 5 different swabs, 1A, B, C, D, and E.
That's right.
Tell the jury what it means to be taking swab.
Well, we use cotton swabs. They're glorified Q-tips on a wooden stick. Swab on one end, just put some sterilized water on it to wet it, and then swab the surface of the area. In this case, blood droplets.
Turn the lights back on.
Okay.
I'll ask you pick a bag and ask if you can identify this. Means to-
You want me to open them? Yeah, that'd be great. Do you recognize the package?
What is
This bag contains the swab samples that I collected from the floor of the garage.
those are the samples you collected, then ultimately tested?
That's right.
Same conditions that you took.
That's right.
Were those samples?
Yes, they are in here.
Get those five.
Yes.
Say it has the bag and its contents be marked and admitted as evidence. It's a over. Agent James, let me go ahead and get that marked. And then see. Agent James, just hold these up and post and get your. Told you,
Sorry,
told you to keep gloves on. Just pull them out and show them to the picture.
It'll be all right. So basically, what I did was I've broken the sticks off of them, but every one of these contains a pair of swabs and some of them still have a good bit of sample left, and some of them are, I believe they're mostly consumed on one of them or something like that. But basically, every one of these little plastic petri dishes contains a pair of swabs, and most of them have some reddish brown stain.
We've been to the house, we've taken pictures, we've taken these swabs, and we've obtained the panties that you exhibit 26, correct?
That's right.
What was the purpose for getting all that?
So the panties specifically, or the other things, or
Well, all of them. Let me ask you this. What were you ultimately trying to get to?
well, ultimately, like I said earlier, we were wanting to hopefully establish a link with a suspect, whether through shoe prints or through blood drops, grazing against the bumper of a car, things of that nature.
Ultimately, going to do a DNA analysis.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell the jury what DNA is.
DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. It's a chemical that's present in most cells in our body. Basically, it's a chemical blueprint for everything that goes on in our body, from how we process the food we eat to how our body transmits nervous signals. There's also a component that DNA is inherited from our parents. We get half from our mother, half from our father. And so even physical characteristics, the fact that we look like our siblings or we look like our parents, it's attributable to DNA. It determines those characteristics as well.
Do individuals have different DNA?
Yes, much like fingerprints, DNA is unique to each individual, with the exception of identical twins. So, for my testing purposes, identical twins would not be distinguishable by DNA testing. But besides that, as far as we know, we've never seen any two individuals have the same DNA profile.
And how do you go about your DNA test? What do you do first? Or you got these samples. What did you do first? Start down this path.
The first thing that I do is called serology. Serology is just the identification of body fluids. Most of the samples that come into our laboratory undergo some degree of determination of, is there a body fluid here that might be relevant? And so in this particular case, I did testing to determine that, yes, indeed, these stains that I've swabbed off of the floor of the garage, they are blood.
You thought it was blood.
Sure.
But you did a test to determine that.
That's right.
And that test generally came back with blood.
That's right.
Okay.
Once I determine that a stain is blood, for example, I'll proceed with DNA testing at that point. DNA testing it's a 4-step process. The first step involves extracting DNA out of everything else. In this particular case, I showed you that I've got cotton swabs. So what I would do is take a cutting from some of that stain and run it through a process where the DNA is removed from all the substrate or the cotton swab, as well as the other biological debris that's present in that stain. I run a second step that gives me an idea of how much DNA is present in that sample that I extracted. The third step is called amplification. Basically, it focuses or specifically isolates. In 2011, we were looking at 13 specific areas on DNA. And when I say that, I guess a lot of people think that maybe DNA analysis consists of sequencing or something like that. We don't do. The testing that we do is we're basically looking at about 12 pages out of War and Peace novel. I mean, we're looking at a very small amount of the DNA, but there are 13 specific areas that are known to be highly variable in the human population. And once I've done amplification on the sample, in other words, I've made lots of copies of what I've already got. The last step is just putting it on a genetic analyzer that separates out DNA fragments by size and then attributes a DNA type to those DNA fragments. Once I have a profile that I've obtained from an item, then I'm able to compare it back to DNA profiles that I've generated from reference samples from individuals in question.
Talk about a few pages of War and Peace. Let me see if I can understand that. If you're looking at DNA attributes, so to speak, there's many of them, correct?
That's right.
But at the time, we're looking at 13 specific ones that can distinguish different people. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Is that what you did here?
Yes.
Is that what's typically done?
Yeah, since 2011, we've gone from 13 to 15, and now I believe it's 24 areas that we're looking at. But that was the standard in the forensic community at the time, and still is pretty representative of what's done.
Must be able to see if the profile matches someone or doesn't match someone, correct?
That's right.
That can be a suspect or a victim, could it not?
That's right. It may also be a mixture, so we may have multiple people present in a profile.
TBI has protocols for this.
Yes.
Followed in this instance.
Yes.
We pass forward to you, document and execute. Recognize it.
This is a copy of the report I generated.
I'm saying that to be admitted into evidence as the next number.
I see it happen.
Yeah. This is the report you prepared
Yes, sir.
at the lab patient on the line with the same as on the swab you took earlier.
Yes.
So you have these 5 swabs. You have a set of this pair of underwear. I want to switch for a second and talk about the underwear. What did you do with it?
The underwear was collected in lieu of, because I didn't have a reference standard from Holly Bobo. Generally,
Let me interrupt. What's a reference standard?
Yeah, reference standard is a sample that's collected from a person of interest in a case. And generally, that's done by a cheek swab. It's quick, easy, but that's assuming you've got the person of interest available to collect a sample from.
If I was a person of interest, what would you do to get a reference sample?
Well, law enforcement would, we actually provide kits they're called buccal swab kits. And it's just a pair of swabs, and they would ask you to open your mouth, and they would swab the inside of your cheek and then package that up and send it to me.
One of those fancy Q-tip type thing.
Yes.
That's a reference sample.
Yes. Historically, they've also collected blood for that, but the cheek swabs are just less invasive and don't require a nurse. And so that's where most of law enforcement has transitioned at this point.
At this point, you didn't have any reference.
That's right.
Sample.
Yeah, both. I use them interchangeably. Standard is kind of the word that implies this is an item of evidence that's specifically collected for generating a profile as a reference.
You didn't have that here, but you did have presumption.
That's right. Yeah. So obviously Holly was missing. We didn't know. We didn't know. Ultimately, I had to find something personal of hers that would generate that I could obtain a profile from that would reasonably attribute to her. I looked at toothbrushes, and from what I remember, there were several toothbrushes in there. I believe it was a shared bathroom, and the investigator was out. Ultimately, she was the only young lady living in the house as far as and using that bathroom. And so just from many years of experience with underwear, I expected to be able to get a profile out of it, and I did.
What did you do to get that profile?
I just took a cutting of the lining and ran it through the same DNA process that I did with the swabs.
That same 4-step process.
That's right.
And after you took the cutting, you actually cut a piece of fabric out
Yes.
and then ran your tests on it.
Yes.
You did produce a profile.
It did.
Now, with respect to the blood, 5 different samples. And each of those tested, they were in fact blood, correct?
That's right.
Let's talk about 1A. We've got back up on the screen. We don't have to darken the lights. But 1A is there at the bottom left.
That's right.
Okay. Tell us what you did with respect to that. Did you run that through the process, the DNA process too?
Yeah, I generated a DNA profile from that sample.
What was your conclusion for really certain scientific certain?
The profile that I obtained was partial. In other words, there was indication that there was, I'll just go on and tell you what my suspicion is, but dirt is known to be, and it is known to be something that interferes with the DNA, specifically the amplification process. And so it became an issue on several of these samples. But ultimately, I got a partial profile, and that profile matched the profile that I obtained from the Bobo, the underwear that I assumed to be Holly Bobo's.
Her mother identified with you on that. That's exhibit 26 that you looked at.
Okay.
You have a profile, a partial profile, correct?
That's right.
You got a partial profile of 1A.
That's right.
Fair to say, just because you see what you think is blood, but test presumptively to be blood, you don't necessarily get a complete DNA profile from it. Certain instances, correct?
Sometimes it doesn't. Yeah. Sometimes. Yeah. Like it's my feeling and opinion that the dirt interfered on this one.
You get a profile from the sample,
Yes.
and that's based on using these 13 specific markers of DNA.
That's right.
We talked about 1A. 1B, which is, point that out for the jury again.
1B is the area that's up close to the wall up here.
What was your result of testing on 1B?
So the profile that I've got there, I actually ran that sample 3 times. The first time I got data that was below my reporting limit.
And I tell the jury what that means. Stay below your reporting limit.
Yeah, so the DNA profiles that I obtained, there's kind of like, we set a point. This is hard to explain, but I would, if I could make an analogy, I would liken it to radio signal for those of us who use radio, where if you've got a little bit of signal, sometimes if you're rolling through the stations, you'll hear some stuff, and you can pick up enough to know that it's a talk show or it's music or this or that, but you can't really hear lyrics. That's there's a range where my instrumentation is similar to where we acknowledge, yeah, that is human genetic data that's being generated. But when you start getting down in these low levels of sample, you get interference, you get data that drops out. Ultimately, what I would say is that data is, we've decided through our own internal studies that below a certain point, that data is questionable. It starts to get gray. It's a gray area where we're hesitant to use it. We certainly won't use it for inclusions. We might use it to exclude people if that's the case. But this sample fell in that range where it was just low level. Again, my suspicion is the dirt was interfering. And ultimately I ran it 3 times. 2 of the times I got data below the point where my laboratory allows me to interpret it. And one of the 3 times my DNA ended up in it, which I think has happened twice in 18 years. So
Cheer or something.
I don't know. There was a period where we wear masks these days because we've learned the hard way that if you talk over something, you're liable to show up on a piece of evidence or on an evidence profile. But my DNA showed up on one of those 3 examinations.
Let's go to 1C. Did the same sort of tests on it.
That's right. Same test.
Well, what were your results for reassigned with surgery?
The profile that I've got was a complete profile, and it matched the profile that I got from Holly Bobo's underwear.
You were able to get a complete profile that matched all those important markers.
Yes.
They gave you results on all those markers.
Right.
And it matched the profile that you obtained from Holly's underwear.
Yes.
Can you use the laser and show us which that was? It's the
1C.
C was the grouping that's on the far south end.
Without 1D. Same sort of analysis.
Yes. 1D is the area on the step and immediately below it, kind of in the middle between the wall grouping and this large pool grouping.
What was your conclusion to the scientific survey?
Again, I got a partial profile from that area, and it matched the profile from Holly Bobo's underwear.
Lastly, 1E, one had striations, you call it.
That's right. The one that kind of resembled an exclamation point that was right in the center, roughly. But yeah, I wasn't able to generate a DNA profile that met my reporting limit.
And again, that's because of what do you think?
Again, just and I will say there wasn't as much sample on. I mean, it wasn't like droplets, like some of the other 4 samples. I still would expect to get a DNA profile from it, and I believe it's my opinion that the dirt played a factor in that.
And those stones and other things we saw on the carport floor.
Yes.
You experienced that you experienced that during your work at TBI on other cases.
Yeah, it's not uncommon. I mean, there are several things that we know of that we encounter on a regular basis. Leather gives us problems. Blue jean dye, the blue dye in denim gives us problems. Ultimately, and I guess one of the frustrating things is that, we've developed tools to cope with these issues that arise since then, but that's where I was in 2011. And so I didn't go back and retest.
With respect to 1C, you said the DNA profile matched the profile.
That's right.
What is the probability of an unrelated individual having the same DNA?
Which exhibit are we on again?
1C.
1C. So the probability of obtaining that profile, if I were to go out and randomly select out of the population, I would expect to find that profile approximately once in 812 trillion, 300 billion individuals from the Caucasian population. I would expect to find that profile approximately once in 1 quintillion, 260 quadrillion individuals in the African American population. In the Southeastern Hispanic population, I would expect to find it approximately once in 3 quadrillion, 595 trillion individuals. And in the Southwest Hispanic population, I would expect to find that profile approximately once in 62 quadrillion, 660 trillion individuals. Points. Yeah, it is a lot.
It exceeds the world population, does it not?
Yeah, that's how we report it, just to summarize it concisely.
Just a moment, Sean.
why don't you kill that light unless you're going to use it? All right, cross-examination.
like to pass it. That's to you.
Is it previously marked or not?
It has not previously been marked, so
You need gloves.
Okay. We have some available. So are you going to want me to cut into it?
okay. So this bag, let's see, I know it is Exhibit 5.
Okay.
Pass it to you.
But that's not correct.
It's not our exhibit number. It's just the number
I'm
on.
trying to keep our records straight.
Right. I think that's the lab numbers. Right. That's. Now I'll tell you what I'm looking at. I'm looking at a report. Do you have all your reports with you?
I hope so. I believe so.
There's so many reports.
Yeah, it's overwhelming.
One, it's a microanalysis report, but it's dated 5/25/11. It's not a report you did, but this report's telling me, I believe you collected this bag.
Okay.
Is that your writing on there?
It is my writing.
Okay. No, I couldn't identify the signature. It's a little scratchy.
Yeah,
Okay.
Did we have scissors earlier?
I have them.
Okay.
Can you go ahead and open that bag for me? Take that. I think there's a pair of shoes in there.
I believe there may be.
There might be other clothing, but I was interested in the shoes. Can you pull out the two shoes in there for me? That'd be deep.
All right, there's E. Here's E.
Now, can you tell me what where you collected these items?
I have to look at my notes.
These clothes were collected from Holly Bobo,
They were collected out of his room.
and were they the clothes that he was wearing that morning?
I'm not sure if I was privy to that information or not. We just found clothing in his room. I don't remember.
Clearly, you didn't take all the clothing in his room.
Definitely not.
I mean, these, as far as you remember, are the only clothes that were collected that day.
Right.
And you would have collected clothes that would have been relevant to the investigation,
Sure.
not just any clothes that were laying around.
Right. I remember looking through his clothing for bloodstained items. It's one of the waiters were collected.
Sure. In case somebody's changed before you got there and they had blood on their clothes.
Right.
And these shoes, can you go ahead and open the two shoes? They're left and
Actually, there are two pairs. So I've got, this is Exhibit 5E, and these are Crocs.
okay.
They don't look like it on the top, but they're Crocs.
Okay. The 5E was the one that I was interested in.
Okay.
And tell me again, tell me what size do they say they are? The Crocs have a size on this
9.
9. It's not necessary to open that then.
Okay.
So Your Honor, this time I'm asked that we put these into evidence. Since they're all packaged in one bag, I don't know if we need to put the whole thing in. Do this. Just do the whole bag in.
Okay. The entire bag and contents will be moved in.
Mr. James, did you do any of the crime scene investigation when the state of Tennessee searched Terry Britt's home?
I did.
Okay, and you're familiar with that also, aren't you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you have your reports with you from that search?
I do.
What's the first date on one of those reports?
I'm not sure. Okay. Because I'm going to get confused.
First date. What's the first date you got?
First.
Reports from the same day.
I'm a little bit lost because we weren't generating reports on crime scene responses we weren't issuing violent crime response team reports in 2011 or 2012. And so
Okay.
I may have done work in the laboratory on stuff that was collected, and it's going to be in a different location from my actual violent crime response notes.
Okay. So are you saying you didn't bring it with you, or?
I think I've got it, but I've got a lot of paperwork. I'm going to need some direction.
Me too. Okay. Well, we'll just start with the search of Terry Britt's house. You remember that this is a home that's that's owned by Janet and Terry Britt. Yes.
Okay. I remember the property.
Okay. And they're a husband and wife.
Okay.
And they live there and close to the Bobo residence. Do you remember that part?
Well, I no, because I got there from an airport. I drove from an airport to the residence, and I couldn't get there again. But
Okay. So when you searched their home, some of the things that you searched there were cars. Do you remember that you searched, there were 5 cars there?
what I remember is that we had numerous teams and numerous agencies involved in that, and my entire day was spent in one house.
Okay.
I don't believe I ever looked at vehicles.
Vehicles. Okay. Which part then did you participate in?
The residents.
Okay. And there were multiple buildings there. Do you remember that there were multiple buildings and then a big,
I believe there was like a semi-trailer or
Yes,
a storage
semi-trailer.
container or a
There
shipping
was a-
shipping container may have been out there.
there was a semi truck trailer that was a refrigerator trailer, had very thick walls. Do you remember that part?
Yes, and I didn't go into it.
Okay. And then there was like a mobile home trailer that had a lot of items stored in it. Did you go in there?
This is not the residence.
Not the residence. No.
I don't believe I may have stepped in there, but I really don't remember much about it.
So you did go in the residence.
Yes.
And do you remember finding some cell phones that were hidden in the residence in the bathroom under some personal hygiene products?
I'm sorry. I'm refreshing off my notes.
It's no problem. Take your time.
I have in my notes that there were 3 cell phones that were collected, but they weren't collected by forensic personnel.
Okay.
Or at least when I say forensic personnel, I mean my team, my coworkers.
And
There was one TBI person, I believe from Nashville, and there was an FBI employee who was involved in those.
and there were some blonde hairs collected there. Were those collected by the forensic team?
I don't remember. I do have in my notes that there was a possible hair collected.
Okay. And where in your notes, where was that particular hair collected from? Can I ask you right now, what is it that you're looking at?
I'm reading my narrative that contains an overview of.
I guess, Your Honor, at this time I've asked for Jinx material. I know I'd asked yesterday and understood I had everything, but I don't believe I have that narrative he's looking at. I'd like to have copies of his notes and narrative, which may help me narrow my questions.
The state understanding everything's been turned over on multiple occasions. In fact, at the end of June, there was a whole nother run of TBI lab information brought to Nashville. I couldn't make that.
And that is what I have, Your Honor. And I don't believe I have a narrative from the Britt House. I know I would have read it and studied it and had it right here.
I think there's absolutely
I can help.
no objection on the part of the state for her to look at whatever she wants to. We see by the fact that we've turned over everything.
Okay.
You can look at it.
Let's hand it, the bailiff hand it to her, and you can examine it. If you haven't been able to find this, we'll run copy.
If it helps, that narrative is actually an extension of the original crime response from April 13th, 2011.
Okay.
So if you've got the narrative for my original response on April 13th, then the Britt portion of it starts on page 5.
I thought you said that you didn't used to do narratives from 2011 from a crime.
We wrote narratives and we turned them over to the investigators but about 1.5 years or 2 years ago, we actually started issuing reports that are accessible in our lens system. So it's actually in a report. It's not just a Word document as it used to be, essentially.
Okay. You signed what I have here. Okay, what I have that I thought was from you was simply it's Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, and then it's a brief crime scene description. It has a lot of a lot of drawings in here, and measurements of the home, and some notes from that day, like what time you arrived, what time you went into particular rooms. But I don't see anything at all in here from the Britt home. And I don't see any typed narrative in what I have. I have handwritten notes. Because it looks like you were there the next day also. And this is at the Bobo home.
That's right.
So if I could just see those papers then, and maybe that'll help me. So it says that you found one possible blonde hair in the portion that you searched, but you aren't the person that tested that blonde hair, are you?
Definitely not. I did find, I've got mention of it. Ultimately, what I have in my notes is that one of our agents, Mike Frizzell, was designated as an evidence custodian for that day in relation to that specific search warrant. And so I've got that all evidence was turned over to him. So I don't even have an evidence log from that day, which we would normally complete as part of VCRT responses. And so
he's the one that might have that evidence log.
And
He's
it's
the one that would have done it.
I think so.
Okay.
And what I would expect is that the bag would probably contain more information on where it was collected.
That would contain what?
More information on where it was collected.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
just kind of a typical.
Do you remember collecting a photocopy of a yearbook with a young woman's picture on it, and somebody had highlighted her name and then rewritten in the highlighter her name out to the side?
It does ring a bell.
I'll pass this.
You have a 10-minute witness.
I don't think our witness, calling this, I don't think it'll be.
I said 10 minutes. I didn't say a short witness.
I didn't want to tell you short. I think it'll be talking with
All right, let's call the next one.
Warren Rainey.